All right. I am going to call to order the November 24th, 2025 Policy Committee meeting. And just acknowledge that 2 of the 3 board members are present, myself and Miss Lynn Golden-Miyarki. I am also acknowledging Dave Cronenberg as being present as well as one of the members of the committee. And if we could just take note of, we don't have to go around, but take note of the other members of staff that are present that will help us move through this committee meeting, as well as members of the board who will be available to make comment as public. So we will move straight in because we have a number of policies tonight to cover as well. So I will open it now up. Nope, we did roll. So we'll do the minutes from the October 27th meeting. Is there a motion for those October minutes?
So moved.
And I will second that. And I do want to make one amendment to the minutes. So the motion is on the table. It has been moved and seconded. And so the amendment I would like to make for the minutes is that in the minutes it says policy 006. The actual note that needs to be updated in the minutes is that the committee was split on this and so did not make a recommendation to the board, and that we actually moved that this item be sent to the full board for consideration without a policy committee recommendation. So just wanted to make that minor change, which we actually did at the board meeting. Is there a second to my amendment?
Second.
Okay, so we will take a vote on the actual amendment. So all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, none. All right, and so that amendment will now be in the minutes. So we'll now take, is there any other comment regarding the minutes from October? Okay, no additional, so we'll take a vote on the main motion of the minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And there's no no's because it's just the 2 of us. So that means that the minutes from October with the amendment pass the committee. All right, on to public comment. Any public comment? All right, we made a pause for that. So we will jump right into new business. So the first one we have is policy 006.1, attendance at meetings via electronic communication. So first what we'll do is we will put the motion on the table and then we'll ask for background. So is there a motion for this policy?
So moved.
And I will second that. And so now I will ask for any background on this particular policy.
Going to have Mike cover the background on that.
Thank you, Dr. Rizzo-Saunders and Ms. Myers. So this policy is just updating our attendance at meetings via electronic communication. And I will note that the updated language, you'll see consistency in regards to our last month, that anything that was slated to say board member is now changed to school director. So you'll see that thread amongst all of these policies as well. But really this focuses in on when it is appropriate to have a board member attend electronically. And there are emergency situations, but then there is language that speaks to, upon request to the board president, who she or he may permit participants to engage electronically at the board president deems appropriate. So the guidelines, again, minimal changes related to wording of school director. And then the last part really is the emergency conditions, and those 4 paragraphs appear to be entered as a result of the pandemic. So you'll see they're directly related in the event that there is a county, state, and federal public health issue, that it grants the authority to move forward electronically should we not be allowed to convene altogether. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there any committee discussion on this? Okay. Only thing I just thought it was strange that electronic communications was used. It later defines it as being essentially, you have to be able to hear the full meeting, participate in the full thing. But to me, it's more of a virtual meeting. So I didn't know if that language was just from like PSEB or what, like it was just a straight, it's not a big deal, but I was just like, because when I think about electronic communication, I'm like email or like, right, but it clearly is defined that that's not what we're talking about. We're more talking about virtual, but that just stood out to me. So just wanted to
It is
mention it.
PSBA recommended
Okay.
language.
Okay. And again, it's defined, so it's completely fine from my perspective with respect to that. Is there any other, if there's no additional committee comment, is there any other comment from anyone else? Please.
About the second paragraph where we use the word extraordinary circumstances rather than special, because extraordinary seems to be, let's say it is work-related. To me, that's a special, not necessarily an extraordinary. I don't know. Again, it's just the adjective that's being used, the descriptor. So I'm not like, oh, absolutely, we should change it, but I just wanted to point out, that seemed like a little more restrictive, I guess, word. So that's my only thought on that one. If anyone else thinks any.
No,
Dr.
I do
Dick-
agree with
Oh,
that.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
After you.
I am just saying, I do agree with Vicki that I feel that special circumstances would give a little more flexibility for nuances, as opposed to the idea an extraordinary circumstance seems much more dramatic in nature. But I'm open to interpretation.
I will not make an interpretation on that wording because it is post-reference in 24 Pennsylvania Statute 407. Therefore, that's why we did not change the language,
Yeah.
because that is the word that's used in the statute. But
Right.
you're the board, and you're welcome to do so if you like.
But if somebody is sick but they can participate virtually, that's not extraordinary. It's just, so whatever we do.
Well, if I may, the first paragraph speaks to the regular circumstances which may require virtual participation. The second paragraph, and particularly the use of the word extraordinary, almost contradicts that. Now, that being said, if the word extraordinary is in the PA school code, I'm not going to quibble, because the first paragraph I can consider to be governing. So that's all I got.
I don't want anyone to think it's restrictive, that's all,
Yeah, just a question on what the state mandates on this. I know I'm on other boards with virtual attendance, and it has to be camera on, and you have to see the presentations. Now, the fact that the only person who would see the person in the camera would be Mark Tracy, because he has it on the laptop next to him. No one else would know if there's someone had the camera on, because we had those same requirements of students during COVID. You're not actually in attendance unless your camera's on. So what does the state statute say about that?
So it only speaks to hearing everything that is said at the meeting so you can make an informed decision. It is silent with regard to whether or not you need to be seen with your camera on. However, if that is a desire of the board, we certainly can write that into an administrative regulation.
Well, and the way we do it, I mean, the other boards that have it, the people who are zoomed in, or they would be like around the presentation, you would see that they're there, but here, it's just sitting next to Mark on the PC. No one really knows who's there or not there, whose camera's on. So the way we operate, it wouldn't make any difference. So I was just wondering what the statute said about it. I don't want to change it, but I think we know everyone's voice by this point, that we know that they're really them.
Yeah, and if this, it's not working for me on this computer, but the hyperlink has the details that you were mentioning. So that hyperlink talks about the hearing piece. So, and that was the definition I was talking about earlier with respect to why it's a virtual meeting and not the electronic. But again, this is to keep it consistent so that we know that it's pulled from a particular thing. That is completely fine with me. So Is there any further discussion? Is there, from the committee, is there any amendment that we want to put forward based on that discussion? Or would we like to make a recommendation as is to bring this policy to the full board?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with.
Okay, so I will
forward.
move forward with the vote to recommend this policy as the changes that are in our packets here to, the policy committee recommends that we bring this to the full board for approval. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. No noes. All right, we'll move that one on to next. So next one is policy 610, which is purchases subject to bid and quotation. I will first put the motion on the table for this. Is there a motion to approve this policy as written in front of us, the policy committee to approve it, to bring it to the full board?
So moved.
And I will second that. And now, any background?
So I just want to tell you ahead of time that from 3.2 to 3.10, all of those will be spoken to by Dr. Christy Brady.
Okay.
They're all financial.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, policy 610, we have gone through and we have indicated in red changes that we are making. We have done a strike through of anything that we are eliminating in this policy that was last adopted in 2014. We needed to update bid thresholds, price quotation, dollar amounts, work performed by district maintenance personnel, and then just some updating there under delegation of responsibility, you know, as some titles have changed in the district. And that is the extent of the changes to policy 610.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Okay. The only thing I just wanted to mention, just for our notes, so it speaks about the consumer price index. Is that the reason that the dollar amounts had to shift in this as a result of that, of those figures?
That is correct.
Okay. Just wanted to-
The state establishes these thresholds. We do check it annually and internally, make the necessary changes. Now we will be checking it annually and updating policy if necessary.
Okay. Yeah, and it's a few $1,000s for those limits. So is there any additional public input? Sure,
I'm just
yeah,
curious.
please.
They use the word on price quotations, telephonic, so versus electronic?
Yeah.
I'm not, is that, it just seems like an antiquated word, but does that
So
mean-
this one is basically, right, again, you could speak to this better, but I read this as, and in other policies that I've looked over, you can get the quotes over the phone, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in writing. Is that what this is referring to?
Is it?
And that's only for items that are under, for the minimum threshold, correct? You cannot, if it's over that threshold, they all have to be in writing, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
But that could be electronic then, when you're talking about in writing?
yes,
Okay.
yep.
Could be fax.
Yes, it could be fax.
It could be email.
We didn't, yes, email, fax.
People still use them.
Yes.
It was just
It has to be
interesting.
documented versus if it's under that minimum threshold, then it would need to be, you could just call around and get quotes, but it does say that also needs to be documented by the person who actually gets the quote in.
A question, I guess, for Dr. Brady. On the, if you can't get 3 quotations, says a memorandum's kept on file, is there an official sole source justification form, or what actually goes into that memorandum?
There are some vendors that will supply us a sole source justification letter. If we cannot obtain a justification letter from the vendor, we can internally write a sole source justification letter.
And those parameters, those hyperlinks, 1 and 2, outline those criteria, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Any other comments on this? All right, so we will, I'll call the vote. So all in favor of bringing, what policy? Okay. Policy 610 to the full, as written with the changes that are in the document in front of us, to the full board with our recommendation to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
And so the policy committee is going to make that recommendation for this policy. We'll move right along to policy 611, which is purchases budgeted. And I will entertain a motion for this policy.
So moved.
And I will second that. And could we please have some background?
Absolutely. Much like policy 610, policy 611 is updating titles and the threshold, the dollar amount thresholds, as we did in the previous policy. We're just reviewing this and updating it since the last time it was updated was 2014.
Thank you for that. Is there any committee member discussion on this item? All right, any other discussion on this item? Open it up. Hearing none, I'll call the vote to bring this policy to the full board with the recommendation for approval from policy committee. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. And it's just the two of us, so we'll move right along from there. Next, we have policy 612, purchases not budgeted. And I will entertain a motion for this policy.
So moved.
And I will second that. And could we have a little background, please?
Absolutely. Policy 612 was last adopted in 2016. We are updating the business manager title to the chief financial officer. And then we have updated that budget transfers are reported to the board quarterly. Historically, it said at the next meeting. And those are the two changes that we had for policy 612.
Thank you. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Okay, I had two comments. One, this may not be a big deal. Some places it is, but maybe not here. In the purpose section, we say the laws of the state, and because we're a commonwealth, I don't know if that matters at all, because for some things it's a big deal, and then some things it's not at all. So I just wanted to note that as I don't know, just wanted to mention it. But clearly, this came from somewhere.
So the language, sorry,
Go ahead.
the language came from PSBA? Yes. Okay.
All right.
Make sure.
And then my other comment has to do with the authority section. It says when funds are not available for a proposed appropriation, and essentially that's a whole lot of words just saying that they weren't budgeted. So could we say that, like, as opposed to, because essentially we then later outline how we can appropriate those funds. So like, for me, that was just, you can get there eventually, like in my mind, it was just a little bit confusing in terms of like, the policy itself is called purchases not budgeted, and then in that section, it talks about appropriation, that it wasn't, it's not funded, but then we talk about in the latter 9 months, you can fund it, but you would just have to reallocate. So it just, to me, those were a little bit conflicting. I get what it's trying to say, but anywho, just wanted to name that. Either way, it's not a big deal to me, but just wanted to mention it.
So would you like to strike the proposed appropriations and put available for budgeted?
So for me, I think it makes it clearer if we said when funds are not budgeted, And because after that comma, it tells us how we can appropriate it. But just after it not being budgeted. So that would be my suggestion. Again, I get the essence of this, and I don't think it functionally would, but if we're looking at it, I just thought I would mention it.
I think the question is, what does available mean? But budgeted means a particular item was given a particular budget amount. Available could mean that item A costs a little bit more, item B we cost a little bit less, so it's now available. So that's, I don't know which way we want to go with that, but there is a difference between there's a fund available and there was a particular amount budgeted. I happen to like budgeted.
Yeah, it's just the latter part to me essentially tells us how we can make the funds available. If the 9 members or the majority of the 9 believe that to be so that first part just seems a little bit off to me, so. But yes, I think that would be, so I will make the motion that we strike out when funds are not available and replace it with when funds are not budgeted for a proposed appropriation, because then the latter part after that comma then tells us exactly how we could budget for that, adjust the budget for that. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
All right, so I will call the vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment as outlined, please say aye. Aye. There is just the 2 of us, so that goes through. So is there any other comment about the this particular policy? And it looks like in my notes, I have one more. Oh, okay, so this it says any, in guidelines, any expenditure in excess of appropriations made with this policy, in conformance with this policy, shall be reported to the board quarterly with a recommendation of funds to be transferred to cover the purchase. I would like to change that section to say that it would be reported to Finance Committee at the next Finance Committee meeting, and quarterly to the board, so that Finance Committee is always kind of up to date, but then the board would be quarterly, which I believe already happens. So like I'm sure that when adjustments are made that are allowable within this policy, they're already discussed at Policy Committee. Just wanted to put it as a part of the guidelines here.
The budget transfers go to the full board quarterly, and we do not run reports on a monthly basis for the Finance Committee.
Okay, so then that would be
we do run a schedule of all budget transfers. It's usually like 15 to 20 pages.
Okay,
quarterly.
then that's fine. That's fine. Then I don't need to. So we don't need to do that.
Okay.
We don't need to add extra work for you. Again, it's well within this policy as established already, so that's not a big deal. And I do know they came quarterly. I thought they were coming to Finance Committee as well, but that's okay. So that being said, all my items were addressed, so we will go back to the main motion with the amendment. So I will call the vote for that we approve this policy. We make the recommendation as a policy committee that the board approve this policy with the one amendment as written. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And it's 2 of us again, so we will move on to the next policy. All right, policy 613. Cooperative purchasing. I will entertain a motion for this policy.
So moved.
And I will second that. And if we could get a little background, we would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Policy 613, we last adopted in 2016. We are updating the title in here And under guidelines, PSBA has simplified it very much to just 2 lines. It took a lot of information out. However, we would specify that information in our administrative regulations.
And I would note that those links have a lot of the information as well, so not having to, this is perfect not to kind of repeat legal language that could later change, that we can access the school code directly through the hyperlinks that are a part of the policy. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Any other public comment? Okay, so I will call the vote on moving this policy with the recommendation from Policy Committee for approval as written. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. We have it, so that one will move forward as well. Next, we are on to Policy 614, payroll authorization. And I will entertain a motion for this policy.
So moved.
And I will second that. Can we have a little background, please?
Absolutely. Policy 614, payroll authorization. We have a couple small changes under authority. The last paragraph, the first line, we changed the wording. I apologize. Leave of absence was in there. And we changed it to reportable leave of absence.
Okay.
Because sometimes, there are non-reportable leaves of absences. And then there was some discussion a little further down there on, non-retention of a temporary professional employee. There was some discussion like internally in our policy meeting. But we kind of talked through that and talked with HR, and they thought that terminology was appropriate.
Okay.
And then down the very last line of this policy, where it says, we added a line, overtime or compensation for additional work can only be scheduled and paid when authorized by the superintendent or designee.
Thank you. Is there any committee discussion on this item? The one thing I had was in guidelines, it speaks about daily sign in and sign out and may be required. Is it required? And we should just say that, or is it only required sometimes? I'm just wondering, is the may at the discretion? Because somewhere else we have, something may happen at the discretion of blah, 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 blah. So just wondering if we need to either put an additional caveat there, or if it's happening, just say that
There are certain departments that do have a check-in and check-out procedure. And this is a little more detailed and defined within our administrative regulation, the actual process and procedure.
Okay, perfect. So there is discretion depending on other factors, but okay, perfect. So I'm satisfied. Is there any public input for this item? All right, I will call the vote. So to move this policy forward with a recommendation from Policy Committee that is approved as written. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And that is going to move forward. Moving on to Policy 615, payroll deductions. And I'll entertain a motion for this policy.
So moved.
And I will second that. And background, please.
This policy was last adopted in 2018. We have reviewed it, and no additional changes need to be made to this policy. So we just need a new review date.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there any committee comments on this one? All right. The only thing I wanted to note is in the authority section, it says no deductions may be made from the wages, blah, blah, blah. And then I was just wondering, because later on it notes legal garnishments, and so I'm not, I don't have enough legal background to know if legal garnishments could happen without the employee's consent, essentially. And then in those instances, what does that look like with respect to that, just that first sentence?
When the district receives information about garnishments, we do contact the employee because sometimes the matter has already been resolved and they supply us documentation and we can verify that through the entity that sent us the garnishment. So we will always touch base with the employee first.
Has there ever been an instance where it conflicts, that the employee, they may not be able to kind of resolve it that easily, and then we have this legal document that says one thing and the employee doesn't give?
For some of the garnishments that we have received recently, you have 60 days to start the garnishment, and usually the employee can
resolves
always
in that.
get it resolved before then, and if not, then we move forward with the garnishment.
So in this, would, so would we need to add that in that situation? I just don't want an employee to be able to point to this policy when we legally would have to, even after that 60 days. So it would be all these deductions here, and in, I guess, the extraordinary, let's use that word, the extraordinary circumstance in which,
Maybe we could change
would-
it from, proper authorization to proper notification to the employee.
right, I just, yeah, something like that would definitely suffice for, again, I'm sure it's only in those situations where where legally have to do it, and of course, we would always want to ask the employee, because we don't want anyone to be blindsided by something like that, but if there's a case where we have to we're compelled to do it by law, then I don't want it to lean on this policy and be like, I thought you were gonna.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be my only suggestion for
So
amendment. So I will, if we can make that amendment, I'll move to amend that section to add the language about notification to that first line and authority, if there is a second to that.
A second.
And is there any other discussion with respect to just that one section and the amendment? I'll open that up for additional input. All right, so we will take a vote on the amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and now back to the main policy, the main motion on the policy as a whole. Is there any other public input on this policy? All right, hearing none, we will, I'll entertain, we'll take the vote on moving this policy with the one amendment to the authority section with approval from policy committee. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we will move on to our next, that one will move to the full board. Move on to the next policy, and that will be policy 16, payment of bills. And I will entertain a motion for this policy.
So moved.
And I will second that. And background, please.
Okay, policy 616, payment of bills, was last adopted in 2018. This is a policy where we have several changes or several additions that we have added. Under authority, talks about the prompt payment. It has been recommended that additional details are put in there, such as, discounts offered or reasons why we would make prompt payment to a vendor. And then it recommended striking through utility bills because that is that is taken care of in number 1, but it recommended putting debt payments in there as well. And all such payments and orders shall be presented to the board at the next meeting. We went through delegation of responsibility and updated some titles as to who is actually doing the work, so that it reflects what we're actually doing in-house. It says it shall be the responsibility of the superintendent or designee upon receipt of an invoice to verify the purchase. We changed it from superintendent to requisitioner because the person that, put the requisition in is going to receive the invoice. So we tried to mirror to what we're actually doing within the district. So titles were updated for that purpose. We added on page 2 at the top, payment, maybe made in the form of check or electronic transfer of funds, because we do pay some vendors that way, and I wanted to be clear in the policy that that is something that we're doing. And again, another title change toward the end.
Thank you for that. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Any public input? Okay. All right, so I will call the vote for this. So to move this policy as written with policy committee recommendation for approval to the full board. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And with that, this one moves forward as well. Moving right along to policy 617, petty cash. And I'll entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
And I'll second that. And if you don't mind giving some background, please.
Absolutely. Policy 617 is petty cash. We have made significant strikeouts in this policy to conform with PSBA recommendations, and some title changes as well. We are working to eliminate petty cash as a whole in the district, but while we have it, we still need to update the policy and follow policy.
Thank you. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Let me see. I had just a couple of statements, questions. So the last paragraph, first sentence, let's see. The person responsible for each petty cash fund shall be prepared to total blah, 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 that one sentence. So how do we determine who will be responsible? We kind of took those pieces out. Is that then, yeah, I'll leave it there.
That's fine. We have developed an administrative regulation that goes with this that details out, who that person is and what the steps are and their actual step-by-step responsibilities with petty cash.
Okay.
The part that, where it is to be bonded, that they're covered by our general liability insurance.
Okay.
So there wasn't necessary to keep that in here.
And is that person different, I guess, depending on the building? Is that what we're?
There are a couple
is that what we're-
buildings that still have petty cash. We are, like I said, we are working to eliminate petty cash, but they are.
Right, you're like trying to get rid of
Petty
this.
cash is locked up in those buildings, and there is a specific person responsible for the petty cash box.
Okay. Okay. And then in terms of amount, does that also kind of vary from building to building, or since it's kind of trying to be phased out?
It's trying to be phased out.
Which I completely understand.
There's generally a specific dollar amount.
Coming from policy committee to bring this to the full board for, approval as is. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that one is going to move along as well. Okay, I think we have one more. The last one is policy 618, student activity funds. And I will entertain a motion for that one.
So moved.
And I will second. And background, please.
Okay. Policy 618, student activity funds, last adopted in 2017. We only have a couple small changes here. Under delegation of responsibility, it has been recommended that we add "and fiscal compliance." And the last paragraph under delegation of responsibility, we have crossed out and submitting required reports to the board, and we moved it to "and made available upon request." And then on the back, or page 2, I'm sorry, it talks about, funds collected and the that they need to be deposited within 5 business days. We established a specific, amount of time that they need to follow that. And those are the few changes that we made to the actual policy.
Thank you. Is there any policy committee discussion on this item? Wonderful. So I had just a couple of comments. It speaks about custodian, and then we talk about an advisor, and there's some other folks kind of named in this. Could you speak to how we're viewing the difference between those roles? Can they be one and the same? Are they always separate people, or are they always the same person? So essentially, we talk about funds collected shall be turned into custodian.
Okay.
That is mentioned, that term is mentioned twice, but we don't define necessarily who that is. So if we look at page 2, it appears on page 1 as well, but in page 2, disbursements from each fund shall be made by check upon request of the authorized advisor and the approval of the fund's custodian. Are we seeing those two as two different people, or?
So when the funds are initially collected, they're collected by the student activity advisor and then turned into the administrative assistant in the office.
Okay.
So that they are locked up.
So the custodian's always the administrative assistant?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And then the other section I had a question on, it speaks to checks need to be signed by 2 individuals who are authorized to approve. How is that determined? Is that determined by the student organization's bylaws? Is it determined by, should we include that in here? Just wondering that, yes, 2 signatures, but then
So
how there's 2 individuals determined?
when a check request is sent down for payment, 2 club members have to sign, then the advisor has to sign, then the high school principal signs, and then it comes down for the CFO to sign. And all of that is detailed step by step in our administrative regulation.
So this too is not actually a good representation of what we do. It's essentially, it would have to it would follow our signatory process for check issuance, correct?
Correct.
So I think, so I'm gonna amend this one to just take that out and say that, because I think we do more.
So, I'm sorry, the actual check, when it is processed, it is signed by 2 board members. The check itself, but the request for a check follows that other process I described.
Okay, gotcha,
I
okay.
apologize.
So this is specifically talking about the 2, so
Yes.
just drawing, what is this, page?
All checks.
Page 2, yeah, all checks shall be signed by 2 individuals authorized to approve such disbursements. You're specifically talking about,
The signatures on the checks.
okay, the 2 board members.
Not the correct, not the requisition
Gotcha.
request.
Yeah, and that actually was covered in one of the other policies we had where it was president and treasurer or vice president in place of the treasurer, in place of the
Yep,
president. So
yep.
that was laid out in that other policy. But all the good stuff about the 2 members of the club and the advisor and the principal, but that's all in your internal.
Which is perfect.
Yes, our internal controls.
Okay, I'll move this one, and if anything pops up, I'll bring it up later. So those are my last 2 comments there.
Not to do it again, but unless you wanted to reference policy 616 instead of just saying to authorize people.
Right, I think the flow of this section for me, when I was reading it, I was thinking that this part of the process was at the club level, and then once it got, like, it would have already had to flow through, it already would already need to be budgeted or appropriated before that, before they got to sign it. So I thought this part of it was specific to, but again, I don't know that this level of detail too could be in the AR, so I'm okay with moving it forward as is, unless, again, another committee member wants to make an amendment, Lynn, but that was just my first read of it, that for sure those other policies made sense in terms of flow. And I know you just explained that we have a variety of other steps before something really gets issued. I'm just thinking about the placement of this sentence in this text was what made my question come up, but again, it was answered. Is there any other public input on this policy? All right, so I'm going to call for the vote with respect to this policy to send it to the full board with the policy committee's recommendation of approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And so that last one will also move to the full board for approval. And any other further business of the policy committee that we want to talk about tonight? All right, so no other business. I will close out this meeting. And we are
Good schedule.
all right.
No.
Sorry, that was not part of your conversation.
Well, they've got a process that they want to go through. They needed to.
Who's presenting? I'm going to send, I'll turn it over to you. You know, did you see what she said?
The lawyers coming, and it's like, the lawyers coming.
I know. Because it said the middle of December.
Yeah, that was not accurate.
I felt like saying, I didn't even have, I said, I was going to tell her, I was going to respond to her, and I thought, I'm not going to bother.
I also have it.
75,000 people? 75,000 people?
Just say Dan. Just say Dan every time.
Sure.
Say the guy in the back.
Yep.
You tell me when.
Now. You got it out?
It's gone.
Okay, you're good.
We're good?
We're good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our curriculum committee meeting for November 24th. And we will begin, I would like to begin by introducing my committee members. So our outgoing committee member is Dr. Jeff McVeigh. We're going to miss you, Jeff.
Present.
And you're present. And our additional member of the committee is Ms. Lynn Goldemiarchi.
Present.
And we have other members, staff members here with us, and we have an additional board member sitting here as our kind of our public member.
Public.
Mr. Michael Finnegan. So with that, I am going to turn it over. Before I do that, we have to do our minutes. So I would like a motion to accept and approve the minutes of our curriculum committee meeting, which was held October 27th, 2025. So Lynn, do you have a motion for me?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And with that, all in agreement, and we can approve it? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the committee minutes for October 27th have been approved. All right, any public comment from anyone in the audience? Okay, no public comments, and thank you for our audience members this evening. We do have two for anyone who's listening or viewing us this evening. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it, to me, this meeting is going to be, I have had a chance to look at the data and it looks really great. I think it looks great in the sense of us moving forward. But this is one of my favorite meetings where we can really listen and look at the data of our students, and I don't know why I'm losing my voice. Sorry about that.
You're getting choked up?
Yeah, I'm getting choked up over the data, right? So to me, this is one of the highlights of the curriculum committee meeting, to hear the data of our students and their progress and their achievement progress. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kimberly Rizzo-Saunders, and she'll take over from this point. So thank you.
Well, and I am just going to let you all know that Becca and Dr. Miller and Ms. Vitri and Dr. Barber all worked super hard on this presentation, as well as the more extended teaching and learning team, Kelly and Erica, as well as Brenna. Brenna couldn't be here tonight, so you are going to hear some information about our access, all good news. And with that, I'm going to let Mike get started on our presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rizzo-Saunders, Dr. Garrett, members of the board and the public. This evening, I have the privilege of sitting between, this is the thorn between two roses, Ms. Vitri and Dr. Miller, but I also want to recognize as well the members of the teaching and learning team, Mr. Ivory, Ms. Austin, Ms. Figueroa, Ms. Pye, and then members of the administrative team as well, who've contributed to us compiling the data. This data is an overview. Since we are keeping this to an hour, we are going to try to stay virtually high level for you and explain a number of things. In the back of my head, I hear Mr. Bowden every time I'm going to use an acronym to make sure that I explain it, so everybody here and in the public knows what we're speaking to. But if the board desires to have more deeper dive information or data to look at pertaining to a particular school, particular subgroup, please ask us and we'll be happy to provide it. But given the context of the hour, we're going to stay fairly high level for you. So as Dr. Garrett said, there are a number of things that we are proud of. There are a number of things that we have takeaways from. And then how are we responding to those takeaways as well? So if we move forward through the slide deck, you are going to see there are three areas that we're going to focus on. They are the PA Future Ready Index data, which consists of target measures set forth by the state and how we did in relation to the averages of the state. But then there's also something called the Pennsylvania Value Added System, and that system is a predicted score. So if you think about, let's say, a current hypothetical fifth grade student, it's going to take their scores, their previous scores on PSSAs, and if they ever took a classroom diagnostic tool, and it's going to make a prediction based on an algorithm on where the kid's growth should be in a given year. And then we are measured based on that algorithm score. So it's a predicted growth metric that we are going to show you as well. And then as Dr. Rizzo-Saunders said, we also have the access data for you now, which is measuring our students' language acquisition who qualify and take access. Okay? So moving forward, we always recognize the district vision and mission, which we know you all had a hand in developing. And then moving forward from the district mission and vision, we put a slide in there just so we can refresh ourselves in terms of our current demographic information. Everything that you see on PA Future Ready Index is reportable in a previous year. Okay, so right there, I believe we have our 24-25 data, and you'll see our economically disadvantaged students are sitting at approximately 48%, 19% for L's, 16% approximately for special ed. And then on the right-hand side of the graphic, you will see our ethnic breakdown as well. Any questions about our demographics to this point? Again, you may have seen some more recent numbers that are slightly different, so I always want to reference that PA Future Ready is a year in arrears, okay? It's being reported out on 24-25 data. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jen at this point.
All right, good evening. We're going to start off by talking through the elementary building level data. So we'll look at Greenwood, New Garden, and Bancroft's data. Mary D. Lang's not included because they don't have assessment data. But first, we're going to take a look this evening at Greenwood's 24-25 PSSA data. Up here, you can see our ELA, mathematics, and our science was under a waiver year last year because that was the first year of the new PSSA for science, and it was a baseline year. So it did not get reported out, the data. But you can see that we had 60.1 proficient or advanced compared to the state average of 49.9% in ELA. We met or exceeded our statewide growth standard in PVAS for only ELA. We still have some challenges to rise to in our mathematics, but we had some strong data growth overall, and we're exceeding the state growth in some areas. All right, and then if you take a look at this slide here, this slide shows our subgroup performance in both ELA and math. You'll see one of these slides for each of our elementary buildings. These slides emphasize, as you can see, the achievement gap between our identified subgroups and our students identified as white. As we go through this presentation tonight, you'll see similar data across our schools that highlight our focus on writing a guaranteed and viable curriculum that ensures all students have equitable access to instruction in essential standards-based content skills, and this is identified in Goal 1 of our strategic plan. And this slide here really highlights some of that, a lot of that work that we are doing, because we need to make sure that the curriculum we put in front of our students is accessible to all of our students. So later in the presentation, we're going to take a look at the district's access data as well, and you'll see student growth definitely in their attainment of English language proficiency. But as you'll see throughout these slides for each building, what we really need to focus on is growing our L's in content-specific grade level standards, because that's what these bars are measuring, our content-specific standards in ELA and math.
Dr. Miller, for the board and the public, we are looking currently at how our students and subgroups did in terms of the target, not necessarily the predicted score.
Yes.
However, can you remind everybody there is no state average for subgroup performance, correct?
Correct.
It's only for everyone as a whole.
As a whole.
In all.
Yeah.
So these
There's
are
no
the
state, we can't
English.
compare it to a statewide, right?
Yep, these are the English and math scores related to our targets.
Yeah. The previous slide was the statewide, which we can't, they don't provide that for subgroups. All right. And then this is the PBOS, this is the growth data that Dr. Barber had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation of whether or not we met our predicted growth at Greenwood in ELA and math.
So what do you think happened with the math? I know it's hard to tell, but.
Hard to tell, yeah. We definitely it was definitely lower in math. The building did have some, I mean, to be honest, the building did have some challenges in its leadership and could have been focused areas, so.
One of the things that we also noticed and recognized is there were several long-term subs within the positions at Greenwood. So we know the benefit of effective and strong instruction and supporting teachers to ensure that students have access to that instruction within the classroom settings, as well as providing them the necessary training experiences, professional development, so that instruction can be provided. So as we looked at these scores, it was evident that there were some disruptions to student instruction, and that is reflective in these scores that we're seeing.
For math, it doesn't look like an ELA, but for math.
Correct. The teachers impacted were instructing in the area of math.
So the long-term sub situation, is that a normal situation or was that an abnormal long-term sub situation?
Actually, it was abnormal. There was an accident about midway through the year that we were not anticipating, and so
Yeah.
one of the strongest math instructional people was not working.
Okay. Yeah, because I know we're just getting started and appreciate all the work in here. I think it'd be great as we go through, I did cheat and look ahead, so I know what I mean, I can see the results, but I think I would anticipate, it would be great to proactively hear sort of in all of the things, if we did better than we thought, why did we think that happened? And if we didn't do better than we thought, just let us know. Like, because the main thing is, like, we see these, and I think what we're all listening for is, what did we do well and how do we keep it going? What did we not do well and what are we going to do to fix it? I realize it's a year back, and we won't see these results, but is the personnel issue resolved in this calendar year, although we don't have the data for it? It wasn't.
We still have long-term subs in some of our key areas for our tested grade levels, yes.
Dr. McVeigh, I think what you're asking us, we have, if you've gone and looked forward, we have takeaways and responses to those takeaways that are embedded in the presentation following the data. But I hear what you're asking for, and we'll try to weave in as we go.
And if it's the same thing for every school, I get wait until the end, but if there's something unique in a school, it's always great to hear that. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we're going to be talking about a little bit later is how we are responding. One of the things that we have been doing this year, and we talked about this through our MTSS presentation, is we have been going in and coaching with teachers and providing that support alongside the teachers and administrators during their collaborative team times, specific to looking at student data as it's live in front of them so we can intervene early prior to it getting to a point where we have results like this on an assessment and it was too late at that point.
And this is the last thing, I'll let you get to it, so I don't want to chop up the presentation, but I think the other thing would be great to hear is, you know, if you can incorporate any of the learnings from when we did previously, like what we're trying to avoid is year after year the same issues. And what you just told me about this math thing is a little concerning, right? But like, how do we take the trends that we see year over year and then apply them to what we're trying to do so that we don't keep doing it? That'd be great if you can incorporate those things in as well. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add in quickly, I'm sorry. With the transition planning, seeing that this was grade 5, they're now in middle school, right? That, if I'm reading that correct?
Correct.
So what does that look like for transitioning the students into now middle school level mathematics, if we're talking about, you know, testing at below expected?
Dr. Moore, do you want to talk about your intervention schedule since you're present?
Please.
We got lots of seats.
Oh, yeah, join us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Could you restate your question just to make sure I answer it appropriately?
Well, just looking at the data with the grade 5, how is that transitioning into grade 6 with the needed interventions?
You got it. Well, we're looking at data that's coming from one measure. So a lot of times you have kids that do better on other measures, such as local assessments or their benchmark exams. The PSSA is just one shot. So for us, we're taking the most comprehensive look that we can of all the children. There is a formula that we have in place for course placement, so we get the right kids into accelerated, the right kids into Math 6, and then also any single student that flags in the 25th percentile or below on our fall iReady benchmark is scheduled into a math extensions intervention course. So it's sort of like Math Plus. And we could sit here and write 100 reasons why a student may struggle in math. They're all valid. Effort, skill, gaps in skills, 100 reasons. And those are all things that we try to make sure that we address in our extensions classes. The goal is always to get the kids back into the regular class. And then also I would just give credit to the math teachers and the ongoing PD from Dr. Miller and Ms. Vitri. I do think that our teachers are constantly learning, asking questions that are based on how they can best meet the needs of their kids so that they can close that gap down for on-grade level performance.
Thank you.
And I would share that some of the other conversations that we're having, which also connects back to the curriculum writing, is making...
Jake, you can join us. Just sit it in case we have more questions. Please.
here.
One of the other things that we're looking at is we're making sure that we're looking at standards and skills attainment. So as we're reviewing the data and looking at those specific skills, we're ensuring that through MTSS, we're providing the intervention necessary so students do have those foundational skills. What we're seeing sometimes in the data is those foundational skills are the things that are catching those kids. So we're going back and providing those foundational skill instruction to the student. And with curriculum writing, that's where those conversations regarding alignment have occurred as well, to make sure that we are explicit in the standards that we're selecting and the instruction that we're providing the students.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I am a middle school teacher, so I understand it's really challenging being required now. You are teaching upper level skills with a skill deficit, so that is a really difficult place to be, and I appreciate all the effort into planning and the teachers who are doing the hard work.
All right, so this takes us to Bancroft Elementary School. We had, key takeaway here is we had 48.3% proficient or advanced, which is near our statewide average. Growth standards mostly met or exceeded, with higher academic growth again in ELA, but challenges in mathematics. We did have a long-term sub in as well in 5th grade last year at Bancroft for part of the year. One of the things that it makes it challenging and why we're seem to be running into this issue is when the state changed the certification to be from K through 6 to pre-K to 4, far fewer teachers are applying to be in a 5th grade classroom that are certified in that area or were perhaps trained in that area. I mean, mathematics training at the collegiate level for elementary teachers isn't very strong to begin with. And then when you take a focus and you put it on pre-K to 4, you're going to focus more on your literacy instruction, and hence we're going to have to, as a district, provide ongoing professional development for our math teachers of math, particularly since a lot of them aren't necessarily certified in that area. And then with the pre-K to 4, recently we've had to even send home some letters indicating that a teacher was teaching outside of their certification area because technically they're teaching in a 5th grade classroom. So that is something that was put on us by the state, but it is definitely something we're now seeing some effects from. So that just could be that's a difference that hasn't been the case in years past, per se. So we definitely will need to take a look at that. But this also really identifies some of our next steps we've been presenting to you a lot about our MTSS implementation this year. And we've been talking about some of the implementations we've been doing with literacy, but we definitely have a ways to go with putting interventions in place for math. We really need to strengthen the core tier 1, then put in those tiered interventions. However, we just can't do both at the same time, focus on ELA and math. So, but it is a conversation that we are actively having. Dr. Barber and I had a conversation about math interventions just last week at Bancroft Elementary School. So it's something that the staff is very well aware of, but we do need to formalize, and that's going to be, we're outlining that in our action steps of the strategic plan. But we are focused on literacy right now. All right, and then as you can see here again, we have our subgroup performance for both ELA and math. So similar to what we see at Greenwood as well, which is why we need to really strengthen those interventions. And then we have, again, our PVAS data here for both math and ELA. And as you can see, math again was an area of concern. All right. Which moves us into New Garden. So we had 58.9% proficient or advanced, which is above the statewide average of 49.9%. Our PVAS scores at New Garden show that they're exceeding the standards, again, particularly in literacy, and we definitely have some growth continuing in math in our 5th grade area. Our next is you can continue to see the trend here with our subgroup populations, particularly we have our Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and our ELs. All right, and then next slide here shows our PVAS data. We had more consistent staffing at New Garden. Definitely impacts. I mean, the teacher is the greatest predictor of outcome for students' success in their classrooms, which is why it's always helpful to have stable staffing. And that team has been particularly put together for a while over there, so had some strengths, more so at New Garden.
So I think it's really important because before we move on to the middle school, to really talk a bit about kind of that strain that exists at elementary school between reading and math. One of the things that's really very important at elementary school and is that students, and you'll hear in 85-15. We want 85% of our elementary students to be achieving 85% of proficiency 85% of the time. So in order to make sure that our math scores are not being impacted actually by a reading issue, it is essential that we address the reading in ELA with primacy, because we know that when that 85 piece is not 85 is not happening, we know that some of the issues that come about in math are a result of a reading deficit. So that some of our students struggle with the math test simply, or math in general, simply because they're struggling to read what's in front of them. So it's really important to mention it because I think sometimes when people start to see the reading scores go up, they're like, okay, we don't have to think about reading. Really, you think about reading until you really start to hit that consistent 85. Not necessarily on a one-day exam,
right,
but overall, and that's why we use deep, meaningful monitoring devices like AimsWeb. So,
Great.
Thank you.
And the other piece I did want to mention, you're seeing 1 year as opposed to a 3 or 5 year trend as well. PA Future Ready will allow you to do that. The one thing I will say is New Garden has been pretty consistent in terms of the growth that we've seen over a 3-year trend. So this is not an anomaly year for New Garden. The last 3 years, we have seen consistent growth. And Bancroft, we've seen consistent growth, except with the exception of this year.
This year.
This year was a dip at Bancroft.
Well, 24, yep.
Right.
The data we just reported out on.
Correct.
Yeah, and I appreciate all the data. I love data. And yes, over the years, we have growth, but it just seems like as long as I've been on the board, 5th grade math has always been an issue. We've been through 6 or 7, I've lost track at this point, different math programs. It seems to be, a stumbling block regardless of the school, regardless of the administration. I mean, Greenwood had its own unique problems, but it's a challenge trying to figure out what's going on there. I don't know, are they?
Some of that professional development. 'Cause
Yeah,
They're
like-
teaching some of the math concepts and standards that they're teaching.
Or they're just fifth graders in general? I mean, I don't.
Well,
That,
graders in general are a little hard. And I think one of the things that we really have to look at is, and one of the things that we're really working at is really mapping our curriculum to the standards. Because when we not randomly, we don't randomly adopt programs, but when we grab a program, remember, programs are written to the standards of the places that are going to buy the most product. So it is essential that we map our standards and that those maps then draw from those programs. Because if not, then we're really teaching to the standards basically in Texas and California. And so without us mapping those standards to our curriculum, that becomes problematic when you look at a standards-based test like this is.
And one thing I know that hopefully will make a difference this year is if a program's not working, instead of just switching it out for another one, I know that we've been contracting for some supplemental programs on top of the programs. And we see like this program met 80% of what we wanted, but it was the best one out there. So we're trying to fill that other gap with some other programs. And I know at least this year, I don't know if we did it last year or not, but we signed contracts to fill in what isn't there. So hopefully that may make some differences as well.
I think, as Jen alluded to as well, we've identified that there's additional professional development that needs to be provided specifically for those that are elementary certified regarding math instruction, effective math instruction, and building foundational numeracy skills and how we instruct that in the classroom for students. Again, what we see in the data for Ames Web and things like that are specific deficits regarding those foundational numeracy skills, and that's why we want to be intentional about what interventions we're providing those students, but we also recognize that they did not go to school to instruct math solely. They're general education certified, so they have a general knowledge of all content areas, and we want to make sure that we're providing explicit instruction to our teachers to build their capacity regarding math instruction as well. The next school that we're going to go over is Kennett Middle School. And as you can see in these charts, the way the charts are represented in PA Future Ready is they provide our identification of those proficient or advanced, the statewide average across the board, and then what the statewide goal for 2033 is. It is a hefty goal for the state of Pennsylvania. However, you can see across the board in both ELA and math regarding the PSSAs that students are hovering slightly above the statewide average. So compared to other peers across the state, they are making growth despite not meeting the expected goals or interim targets. Some positive takeaways: the growth indicators are well above the state, well above standards in mathematics and some English components. And if you look at their academic growth scores for PBOS, you can see that for English language arts, their academic growth score is 80, which is fantastic. It means students are growing. And for math, their academic growth score is actually 100. So we talked about receiving students that might have deficits. They're going above and beyond to fill those deficits at the middle school level. And what I'll say is, in order to address those transitions and the dip years, there's targeted curriculum alignment. The teachers are looking at the data. Dr. Moore has looked at the schedule and put those interventions in place to ensure that he's strategically scheduled students and that he's provided those courses and interventions for students to make sure they are able to exceed those standards and growth.
It's also really important when you're talking about growth that you look at when you start stripping away kind of just the percentages and you really look at growth and you're talking about 100% growth. Basically, what we're saying is that they are making more. Every child should make a year's worth of progress. Mm-hmm. But at the middle school right now, they are making more than a year's worth of progress, which means that that's catch-up growth. That's not only are they they're making the year that they should get in 6th grade, but they're making more than just that year. So when you start to see catch-up growth like that, it's really important.
Again, this is a breakdown of that subgroup performance for ELA and math on the PSSAs. Again, you can see the same discrepancies that we're seeing across the board in all of those areas, which is why we have that push for curriculum writing, which is why we're looking at alignment across the board from K to 12, so that way we can address the deficits that we're seeing and ensure that curriculum is really aligned to the standards that we want students to be learning, that we know are important to provide them the skill sets that they need to be successful later in life. And this is a representation of the PVOS data across the board for PSSA Math, PSSA English Language Arts, and the Keystone Algebra 1, where students are making significant growth in all areas.
Ms. Vici, if I could, there's been many years that Dr. Moore has sat in the audience or sat at this table for some of these data to be presented, and they have not looked like that screen up there looks. And I think he needs to be recognized for his leadership as well as his entire staff, because the year's worth of growth that the middle school made was truly outstanding. And I'm not saying that because he's here, because there's been years where we've seen more red, and he has taken ownership of it, and I think his leadership is directly impacting the success of our students.
Okay, I got to ask. So what would you say are the top, you can fill in the blanks, 3, 4, 5 things that you had to zero in on to make those changes? I'm just curious. I mean, the numbers are, so congratulations, the numbers are amazing, and it's great to hear the historic perspective, but you could remind us of the things that you implemented to get to this point. It'd be great to hear them.
Yeah, it's not perfect data, but we're in a unique time. So we know we're dealing with kids who had an interrupted earlier education. We were able to use some of our existing staff in some interventions, which really helped. But when I hear Dr. Rizzo-Saunders and others talk about curriculum mapping, deconstructing standards, I'll give you the analogy of your class is sort of like dinner, and the intervention is like a vitamin. I mean, as long as you're eating a healthy dinner, you really don't need the vitamin. We have built a school system that's giving kids a lot of vitamins. And that's okay, that's what they need right now. We're getting caught up. But really the focus is the meal. I mean, it's the curriculum mapping, it's writing a quality, guaranteed and viable learning experience for all kids in the classroom so that there are less kids that fall behind, so there are less problems to solve. I think the middle school's done a good job of solving some of our problems in the interim, but there's still a tremendous amount of work to do to improve the service that every kid gets in that general education setting. But as a whole, though, I would say there's a lot of teamwork happening at the middle school. There is a great partnership between the teachers who want to learn, who want to have real conversations about kids. They have embraced some hard changes from teaching and learning. Two things I would say is that we're getting our assessments written from teaching and learning. So we are practicing on a 10-foot hoop, and the game is on a 10-foot hoop. Math got harder. The grading policy, which still needs to be refined some, has made math harder. So for students to do well in math, they need to show mastery of on-grade level content. No way around it. That has made more students and families sort of worry about math a little bit. What gets monitored gets done. What you worry about, what you stress, a healthy amount of stress. It has been really prioritized. And if you look at the ELA data up there, there's nothing more convincing that curriculum matters, because if you were to watch some of our 6th or 7th grade ELA teachers, they are some of the best teachers that I've ever seen in my life. However, for their data to fall in the green, you think, what's off here? Well, it just may be that what they're teaching needs to align a little bit more closely with the standards. So I would say, stop and smell the roses, but also at the same time look up and recognize that we've got a long path to go. And it starts with the Tier 1 general education experience that comes from the curriculum mapping process.
I think the other thing that I want to share that Jake has spoken about and we've spoken about, really, it was the focus on scheduling. So that intentional focus on scheduling for his building has driven a lot of this change. And along with that intentional focus on scheduling came the intentional focus on instruction. He has true teams occurring in his building where teachers are able to collaborate, discuss student progress, discuss student data, discuss what interventions are being provided, and then how we continue to support those students across the board. So he's a strong supporter of that true teaming within his building, and I think we're seeing that in the data that we're presenting. Because those conversations are able to happen, because there's a focus on data and instruction, that's what's driving these data changes within the middle school. And again, these are students that are coming in with deficits from elementary. So the work that they're doing is over and beyond to ensure that they are closing the gap plus some. So that's where that intentional focus is occurring, and that comes with leadership, with a driven focus to ensure that those things are prioritized within a building and to make sure that it's seen to benefit all students.
I just want to piggyback on that because Jake was so humble. I think that it's really, really important for everybody around the table and anyone at home that's watching. Is there anyone at home that's watching? Oh, great. That people recognize that Jake paid attention really carefully to instructional leadership, that he took on a bold project. When you start looking at the schedule, that upsets people, it upsets students, it upsets staff, and he said no, that there has to be a better way to do this, and he was willing to wrap his team and his mind around getting that done. And he has also said that we have to look at data in order for students to get better, and through the schedule and through the means that he has put that in place as a priority. And those are all leadership pieces that are really important. And I would also say that if Jake wasn't sitting there. And I've said that to Jake.
I'm glad that one of you brought up with the elementary, with the general ed and the certification in math. I wasn't aware of that. Jake, do you, at the middle school level, do you see any deficiencies in the math skills of the math teachers, of their practices? Does any of that blend over into your staff as well?
In 6th grade, it does, because the elementary certification is K to 6. So really, if we felt like it, which we don't, we could just tell people, reach in a bag and pull out a card, see what you're going to teach next year in 6th grade, because they're certified to teach everything. Not at all. I was setting up the example of we've had some consistency. We had a long-term sub this past year in 8th grade math, and she filled in beautifully, and she's with us again this year in 7th grade. So it really is, it's the team approach where, as a teacher, there were other language teachers that taught the same subject as me, but I would go weeks, sometimes months without seeing them. Our teachers have time to work together every single day. We only require that they meet as a subject area team, call it 7th grade science or 8th grade ELA, once per week, but they're choosing to meet sometimes every single day of the week. So where one of them may have questions or they may not be as creative, they are able to lean on each other's strengths. And really, that team chemistry lifts the performance of all the students. So you may be the bottom floor math teacher, but the idea that you have impacts main level classes and the top floor classes. And the next thing you know, the team, they're comfortable letting their guard down. They share ideas. They have difficult conversations. They talk about kids. They talk about their results. It's been a really effective collaborative teams process at the middle school that we lean heavily on. So it's been effective, and we're going to try and keep it going. And this here, too, comes the very first year we took 15 minutes off of our ELA block and 15 minutes off of our math block so that we could do what most schools are not doing, which is real science and real social studies. So all of our core blocks are the same length of time right now. So we do ask some help from our social studies and science teachers in teaching some of those or reinforcing math or literacy concepts. But as a whole, pretty encouraging signs for the first year in the new master schedule.
So,
go ahead.
I'm going to ask, because we have a lot more to go. So if you can jot down your questions, down so that we do address them. Let's get through them because we have many pages and data to go through. And if we want to get out of here at 8, which we won't, let's focus on having the presentation done. Please make notes of questions you might have, all right? Because we don't want to overlook anything you might want to ask. Okay, so we're going to not interrupt. Keep it going.
So the next building that we are going to be looking at is Kennett High School. Again, you can see that the proficiency at 60.9% for ELA does exceed that state average of 49.9%. And the academic growth varies with excellent scores prior years in science and literacy, but below standard in mathematics. Again, when we're looking at data, we want to focus on prior years as well as the current year tested to see where those areas are. Biology was a waiver year, so you can see that that's indicated as well for theirs. And our response is to really intensify math support at the secondary level. We are having ongoing data meetings bi-monthly with the high school. This year, as we talked about during our MTSS presentation, we have implemented universal screening at the high school to try to target, identify and target the students that have deficits in both ELA and math. So we are using AIMSweb for ELA as a universal screener and AIMSweb for math as a universal screener. And in December, we will have a follow-up meeting with a company for some supplemental resources to provide interventions for those students within the day. Additionally, there's conversations regarding looking at the schedule to provide staffing resources that are already allocated at the high school level to provide those specific interventions as well for students, so we can intervene now with the data that we have. You can see the subgroup performance data for ELA and math on the keystones as well. There are, again, a focus for us to look at curriculum and alignment across the board to ensure students are getting equitable access with instruction within the classroom. And as we know, Keystone Algebra, this is something we have looked at in the past. So because we offer algebra at the middle school level, we have students that are taking the Keystone test at the middle school level. So essentially your highest group of students that are already passing it there. You then have another level of students that have not yet passed the Algebra Keystone that are then at the high school level. And we've identified that there needs to be additional support and instruction specific to algebra. In addition, one of the conversations we've had during our curriculum mapping is to ensure that the algebra course that students are taking, whether at the middle school or the high school, is the same, so that the experience that they're getting is not different. We're looking at the standards rather than what experience we're providing students. So we want students to be attaining those standards and skills within the math courses. We have seen great growth within biology and literature. Later on, we'll talk about some things that we have done in those areas to target students and growth in those classes, including co-teaching that has been occurring, and we're seeing that benefit in student growth as well.
So it's important to know, as you're looking at these three indicators, that the Keystone Algebra 1 is not the cohort score. It is the students who took the Keystone only at Kennett High School. Whereas if you're looking at the biology and literature, that is the entire cohort. So remember on a previous slide when we showed Keystone Algebra 1 at the middle school, a number of our students are taking Keystone and it's attributed to the middle school because that's the grade they're in, 8th grade when they take it, or 7th grade. Whereas these are only students who take algebra at the high school.
So some of the things we wanted to talk about, how we're responding to the data. And we spoke through these things as we went through the presentation. So we're developing consistent vertical alignment across those grade levels. We're having those deep conversations with teachers, and our PD days really are focused on ensuring we're looking at that across the board and having those conversations. We have been clear that curriculum writing ensures that the materials that we're providing, the instruction that we're providing to students is responsive to their needs as well. We're looking at the resources that we're utilizing to provide that instruction. And one of our biggest conversations that we've had is ensuring that our curriculum is program agnostic. We don't want our curriculum connected to any specific program, rather than the standards Rather, we want it connected to the standards that we want students to be learning within Kennett Consolidated School District. Again, we are having those discussions regarding profile of a graduate and what we had created there, because we want our students to be meeting those as well, and creating aligned curriculum to those profile of a graduate statements, the ICANN statements that we created, and the instructional focus that we developed as a district to ensure all students are receiving that same instructional experience. We have been working on refining our MTSS structures across the building. You've heard our presentations regarding MTSS and the continued work that we are doing there. Part of those conversations have occurred during our collaborative team experience meetings that we're having to ensure there's a focus on data analysis, looking at the data, responding to the data, and ensuring the experiences that students have within elementary buildings and within all of our buildings are similar. And then we're participating in data meetings at the secondary level to ensure that we're reviewing and analyzing data to make informed decisions about the instruction, interventions, and scheduling.
All right. So one of the questions that always comes up is how the board can support us. So we, will continue sharing out about our curriculum mapping work for our Tier 1 instruction, but really providing that time that we've dedicated to our in-services has been crucial for this work. We will continue to share out about our MTSS manual, its implementation, and the work that goes around it, particularly as we move into looking at some interventions for math. Our professional learning, you've heard us come talk to you before about our K-3 focus in literacy. Particularly, we have a cohort of administrators and some teachers doing letters training. And you'll be hearing some more about that in the near future as we look to expand that professional training to some of our other staff. Because again, as you can see from the data presented, that the more we equip our teachers and how instrumental they are to the success of our students, we need to provide them with more than just materials. It has to be their instructional practices. And then we will talk a little bit about our access data, but some of the important things that we do have in place too are our classes that are able to be co-taught when we have staffing that's available to do that with our ELD students, and providing some of those in-class scaffolds really is important.
So in consultation with Dr. Rizzo-Saunders, because we really feel the access data is really important, I don't think we can do it justice in 10 minutes.
Yep.
We'd like to defer that for the December 15th meeting. And Dr. McVeigh, we invite you back just to come sit in on that. I'm serious, please. If you can do it, we'd love to have you join us. And that way we can truly do your presentation questions that I think will come up, and we don't have to feel like we're rushed at all.
Okay.
So I think everyone will be able to attend the December 15th meeting. So let's do that. So we have maybe 10 minutes so that we can ask additional questions on what you've just seen. And before we do that, I just want to apologize. I did not introduce Mr. Cronenberg earlier. I'm going around introducing. So I apologize that I didn't. Yeah, Mr. Cronenberg is also around the table here with us this evening. Okay, with that, any additional questions you might have to address what we have heard so far on the data? And is there anything we need, perhaps, additional information that you might be seeking beyond what we have gotten so far? So I open that up to the group.
Well, yeah, I guess I have a question. Thank you for going through the section about how you're responding to the data. I just wanted to make sure I was trying to connect the dots between what we heard about some of the things that were going so well at the middle school and some of the things that are captured here. And I think that's what I'm reading, but I think it was a general question of when you look at this stuff over time, yeah, I guess it's on. When you look at this stuff over time, if we're going to try something new and it doesn't work, we need to fail fast, but then communicate it, right? But then if we do something new that works, I'm just curious about how we get our head around that, and then that gets shared across the other buildings. And I think that's what I was hearing in this, what are we going to do? Because I'm not sure what all these things mean, but is that what collaborative team experience plan, is that something that came out of the middle school, or is that something else?
So the collaborative team experience plan came out of discussions that we had as administrative teams, teaching and learning and pupil services. What we were seeing in the data and across the board is that there were maybe not effective communication occurring throughout every building with consistent messaging. We wanted to ensure that every teacher was receiving the same coaching, receiving the same support, receiving the same engagement in conversations to support student achievement within the buildings. That goes into utilizing our data platforms and how we're looking at that data, how we're analyzing the data, and then what interventions we're providing, because we wanted to ensure that the experiences that students were receiving, we do have some population that's transient populations, was the same whether they were in Bancroft or Greenwood or New Gardens. So that came about based on those conversations and really looking at the data across the board to ensure that we were supporting all teachers.
And Ms. Vici, can you also speak to, when we talk about data, we showed the board what is like annual data with PA Future Ready, but we have ongoing data that is also embedded in this presentation in terms of the iReady and the Ames Web data. That is the local data that we are administering. Can you speak to that, about how that ties into CTs?
Yes.
And MTSS?
So part of the conversations that we've been having are focused data conversations regarding how to disaggregate data specific to Ames Web. ELA is what we use it for in the K-8 level, and then math, we use the iReady diagnostic. So they're specifically looking at that data and identifying where students fall within the tiers, and then where they can actually intervene based on student-specific skills to ensure that we're closing those gaps earlier in the elementary level, so that way we don't see some of those deficits that we were seeing in the past get to the middle school level. Our goal is, we know when we intervene earlier and we address the skill deficits earlier, that we're able to close those gaps earlier. So that's part of our goal with looking at that ongoing data throughout the year and supporting teachers in making those instructional decisions regarding how to intervene.
So I think it's everything that Rebecca said, and what that CT or collaborative time is able to do is really look at what students are able to do, what do they know, what are they able to do, and if there's deficits there, similar to what Jake has done at, Dr. Moore, sorry, Jake has done at the middle school, and really say, okay, so what are we going to do about that deficit right now in real time? And that's what the collaborative time will allow.
Other questions, comments from the presentation that we've heard, half of it?
I just have one more, I think, or at least one more.
Please, jump in.
What is the venue for this kind of information and its learnings being shared with all the buildings and the teachers? And then how do the principals use this information to have either group discussions or even one-on-one discussions about, let's talk about what happened. Let's celebrate the things that were great. Let's talk about how we fixed the things that weren't. And those, like, how does this get shared as deeply with everyone else as it was with us?
So one of the things that we did with the administrators is we have a data platform, Linkit. We worked with them to build out dashboards which house the data, and they utilized that data platform and additional data that they were looking at to set those building goals. So they have an ongoing focus to look at data within their buildings specific to some of what we're seeing today and some more things as well. They are working towards those goals within their building. They've communicating those throughout their building as well. In addition to that, we've been having ongoing conversations with the building principals specific to those data areas as well, because it does connect to their school plans and the plans that they have that get submitted to the state for approval. Again, I talked about the data meetings that we're having at the high school level. Those are bi-monthly, so twice a month we have those very focused data meetings. Administrators are part of those data meetings. There are interventionists that are a part of those, MTSS coordinators, ELD coordinators as well. So we have team members that are a part of those data conversations in addition to pupil services, so we can look at all aspects of all of our students and make sure we're providing those necessary supports. And that's where I'll say those conversations regarding MTSS at the secondary level and what that can look like and how we can intervene and respond to that data now rather than later are coming about. Similar to that, Dr. Moore has the collaborative teams at the middle school level, and he has an MTSS team at the middle school level as well. He has a strong focus on instruction and data and is continuously looking at that and communicating that out to his staff. So I think that lends to those conversations regarding data and how we can intervene and respond.
In addition to that, we are required by the state of Pennsylvania to submit, as well as the federal government, school level monitoring by quarter. And we work directly, our team works directly together with the building principals to develop those plans and to monitor the progress of those plans. So we are sharing those data as well in those school level plans that are occurring at every building.
Thank you. Thanks.
I don't want to be the one to take us past 8, so I'll make this very, very brief here. And I know you're the curriculum experts. I certainly am not. But is there a chance for collaborative work at the 5th grade level in math like there is in the middle school? Because it seems like you're taking last year's underperforming 5th grade math with general education teachers, putting them in the 6th grade. And again, they're general education teachers. It's the same cohort that moved up a year, but with the collaborative program, they seem to be making greater strides. So I don't want to, I apologize if I'm generalizing or oversimplifying it, but is there time in the schedule, or do we as a board need to approve making time in the schedule at the elementary level for more collaborative time, particularly in math?
So we're going to be spending time with the elementary school principals and really looking hard at reading block and math and talking about how that time gets worked into an ongoing schedule and how the 3 buildings and MDL to schedule time.
Which would be great. Good, very good question.
I'm going to be the one
Go
to take
ahead.
us past 8 o'clock then.
Go ahead, go ahead. do
Dr.
it.
Barber, you mentioned the federal submissions that we're required to make. Is that related to ATSI? And if it's not, how does all this fit into ATSI?
That's a great question. So we have schools that are designated as Title I schools, and as a result of that, we are responsible to develop school level plans for Title I schools. In addition to that, the middle school actually happens to be both Title I and ATSI, and ATSI is the state designation for targeted school improvement, as well as the high school. And in addition, the high school we use as an example, we don't categorize the high school as a Title I school, but they are on ATSI, so they have to do the school level plan as well. So Jen, Rebecca, and I, Brenna, Austin, we meet regularly with the building principals. The building principals are doing a great job now of monitoring quarterly progress, so we'll get questions from Dr. Moore or his peers at this point, but we don't feel like we have to sit down at this point for progress monitoring. It's just communication back and forth. We do sit down and develop the actual plans together. So you're either Title I federal, or in the case of the high school, they're ATSI. The middle school's ATSI and federal, although we're hopeful that the middle school, with the recent data we just showed, will be moving off of ATSI.
So what we saw tonight is several pieces of the puzzle, and ATSI is another piece.
One of the things that I also want to point out regarding ATSI and TSI is it is 3 years, the state, once you're identified as ATSI or TSI, it's 3 years that they're looking at that data, and it's generally specific to our subgroup performance on that. So the things that have flagged the buildings in the past were our EL subgroup performance, Hispanic subgroup performance in the past, in addition to special education students with disability subgroup performance. That's one of the critical reasons why it's important to look at that subgroup data and look at the growth that students are making and really have that guaranteed and viable curriculum in place so that way we can address the instructional inequities that might have occurred in the past for those student groups. But that's the other reason that it's really important to look at the data over time to see the growth that students are making and be intentional about the instructional decisions that are being made in a building. And those decisions we're making about scheduling to ensure that we are providing students the opportunity to close those gaps.
Dr. Rizzo-Saunders.
Yes, sir.
This team sitting across from me tonight, and Mrs. Austin, who I know is not here, and many other people who support this work, seem to be on top of things. And we seem to be rowing all in the same direction in a way that we perhaps haven't in a while. So congratulations. I'm excited to hear, and in some cases excited to see, where we are, but it's always nice to see the good scores rather than the bad scores, but at least we know where we are, right? I'm going to start with you, but, feel free to farm this one out if need be. So if we're all rowing in the same direction, what does the race look like, right? What are our data markers? What are our goals? Curriculum mapping may fit into the pieces somewhere, but what does it look like in 2 years and 5 years and that sort of thing?
So I actually have an article I can send to the board if you're interested in that. It's what the world's best school systems do. And it talks about really laying the foundation. So the next couple of years are really about laying the foundation, and that is part of the strategic plan and developing that guaranteed viable curriculum and making sure that we have horizontal and vertical alignment. So if I'm a second grader, I can go to any second grade and have the opportunity to learn and be able to do what every other second grader in Kennex Consolidated School District does. Reading will become a focus, and making sure that through that our teachers at the elementary level feel that they both have what they need as far as knowledge and capacity to teach our youngest learners, so K1, 2, 3. And then following that up with making sure that we have collaborative teams and that we are very intentionally making decisions about instruction and materials that we're selecting for instruction based on the students that are in front of us, and really repositioning our teachers as the experts who make those decisions because we've provided them the opportunity to develop the skills to be able to do that. Many of our teachers are there already and are just looking for some permission to do that. So by the time they get through that curriculum mapping process, many of them will be able to run very quickly. And those that are not, then we need to make sure we've scaffolded their experience so that they feel empowered to make those decisions. Because at the end of the day, you can look at every research study, and every research study will tell you one thing matters most, and that is the teacher that stands in front of the students. And I could use an extra half hour in the elementary day, just so you know.
I think I appreciate your cutting it off there. I appreciate your answer. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dave, that was great, a really great question, and a great compliment to the team as well. So can't thank you enough. The three of you, plus your missing partner, are doing an exceptional job. Not only was our last month presentation amazing, so was today. And I mean, I'm a data person in the sense of really, really thriving and looking at what we're doing and the difference it's making. And we are, when you look at the past few years and where we are now, we're moving forward again, which is really great to see. So thank you for all your hard work. It's not over, we know that. And Dr. Moore, keep it going over there. which I know you will. Lynn, do you want to say something?
I have a daughter going to the middle school in 4 years, so I'm very excited.
With that, any other comments at all from anyone? All right, so our next meeting will be Monday, December 15th, and we're going to start at 6 because there are no other committee meetings scheduled. So we're going to start earlier, and we'll make sure that's posted at 6 o'clock, and we're getting really close to the big holiday break as well. And also, when I do the report at the board meeting, I tend to get people to focus and go back and listen to what was presented, because there's no way I can capture everything that we have discussed here at the board meeting when I'm doing an overview. So thank you again. So our next meeting, we're going to focus on the access data, and I think we have another topic that both of us will admit have forgotten what it is, but it's written down. We know that.
Enough to have a December meeting.
So we will see everybody at the December meeting, and yes, I was going to wish everyone a great Thanksgiving. What? What did I do wrong?
Nothing, that's what I was going to say.
What did I do wrong? Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving break.
Thank you.
That he does at the next.